Hello and welcome to Shifting Gears. On this episode we're going to be changing the front hub bearing or wheel bearing on a 2006 Chevrolet Impala. One thing you'll notice on these, you're going down the road, you get a roaring noise. You turn one direction, it gets louder. You turn the other direction, it'll get a little bit quieter. Now on doing that, say if you're driving down the road, you go to the right, it gets louder. You go to the left, it gets quieter. What that is telling you is the position of which bearing is bad. If you turn right, it gets louder. What happens when you go to the right? The weight shifts towards your left, puts more pressure on your left side. And then when you go left, it'll shift, go to the opposite side. So how I know which bearing it is like I said, go to the right, weight shifts, gets louder. That shows that the left wheel bearing is bad. If it was just the opposite, you turn left, it gets louder, it would show that it's the right wheel bearing that's bad. Another way that you can tell on it is grab the tire, real lightly, try to give it a wiggle, kind of in and out. Not always, but sometimes they will have a little bit of play right there. That indicates that the bearing's bad. Funny thing about the wheel bearings though is sometimes they won't make a sound, but you grab the tire, you can feel that play. Sometimes they roar like crazy, and on this case, you grab the tire, give it a wiggle. It's got no play in it at all. But because of going side to side, hearing the difference in the wheel bearing each time we make a turn, we know which wheel bearing's bad. Alright, let's get this started. Alright, first thing we're going to do is pull the wheel. Now, just to make this easier, we're going to cut the wheel all the way to the left so that we can get ready to remove the brake system. Another thing that helps, take a little pry bar, stick it in there, and kind of pry out a little bit. What that does, that compresses the pistons in the caliper, give you a little bit of play right there. If the rotor happens to have a lip on the outside edge of it, that'll help you clear that lip. Now we're going to remove the brake caliper by removing these two bolts right here. And you lift the caliper off, roll it over out of the way, make sure it has something that it can lay on so you don't overstretch the hose. If you don't have anything to lay on, you can take a bungee cord, wrap it around a coil spring, around like the hood strut or something like that to hang it from. Now we need to get the caliper mount off of it. It's got two 15mm bolts on the back side that we have to take out. Make sure when you go take the second bolt out, you're holding the bracket so it doesn't drop. Now on this one, it has a Torx bolt right on the edge of the rotor. Mainly that's there for assembly as it's going down the assembly line, but we need to get that taken out also. Okay, now this Torx bolt here is actually a T30. You don't really want to use an air tool on them because they're so easy to strip out. So what I'm going to do, you notice when you go to unbolt it, the whole thing wants to spin on you. So what we're going to do is we are going to hook the pry bar in between a couple of the studs. We can angle it just right so that when it tries to spin, it'll pull it up under the body, hold itself in place for you. Now, make sure that the Torx bit's all the way inserted in the bolt so you don't strip it out. And there we go. Okay, now we got the bolt out. I'll pull the rotor off and put it out of the way. And we need to get the proper size for the axle nut. 34 millimeter. Okay, now we're going to pull the axle nut socket, or the axle nut. And once you get it all the way out, I like to take and push on it so that we can tell if the axle's moving. If you don't have movement with the axle, let's see. You can get an air hammer with a round nose bit on it, put right in the concave section in the middle of the axle. If for some reason you don't have a hammer, air hammer, you can use a regular hammer and a punch. Just make sure you don't damage the threads on the axle. Now we got all that loose, we need to take her up and come at from the back side. Okay, now we are ready to remove the bolts that hold the hub assembly on. If you look from the back side, you've got three. You got one there, and then the other one on the rear side of it. So, get a 13 millimeter, put it on there. It's better if you use a swivel socket on this. And top one. Some ones. And when you go to pull out the last bolt, be ready so the hub doesn't end up falling down on you. They can have a little bit of weight to them. World. Alright, now a little tip for you on that. See, that top one's harder to get to. You take and push in on the axle, get it out of the way a little bit, it'll open up a little bit more room for you. Alright, let's get that axle to go in. Now we are ready to pull the hub. Let's see. One more thing, actually. This vehicle does not have ABS on it. However, the hub that's in it is designed for an ABS vehicle. The wiring, you can see right there, actually goes into the back side of the hub. So we have to detach it from this bracket to be able to pull that out. Come on. There you go. Sometimes the hub assemblies will fall right out. Sometimes they'll corrode up in place and they're a real battle to get out. And you can take a hammer and smack the center of the hub assembly right around through here and kind of walk it out that way. If you want, you can also get you an adapter that looks like this for the air hammer, which you would put the bolt back in a couple threads, put this over top of the bolt, and bang it through. Now, you don't necessarily want to bang on the bolt itself with a hammer, but another thing you could do is put a socket on an extension on it and tap it out, and then work your way around as you walk it out. And in this case, we like to make noise. You can see it's pretty well about to come out now. And one thing you want to make sure of when you go put this back together, you put the splash shield back in the proper position. It's easy enough to look for where the caliper would go and line it up with where the caliper mounted. Now we take our new part and set it up in there. Same thing, if yours happens to have ABS, you just want to make sure you line up where the ABS wire comes out with the original location where it was at. Now, get this up in here, you just want to make sure that the axle is going into it straight. Grab the axle from the back side and push it through a little bit. It also helps, before you have this thing set completely in place, to take the bolts from the back side, start to thread a couple times on each one of the bolts, then you can shove it in and tighten it down. Now it's time to tighten these bolts. Little word of advice: anytime you use an extension, you'll actually lose the torque on the bolt. That bolt will not get tightened as much. So after using the air hammer on it, I'm going to go back over it with this. Make sure that it is tight. Alright, now that we got everything from underneath done, it's time to put your brakes back together. And once again, we use our pry bar trick to keep this from turning as we tighten up that screw. And to put the caliper mounting bracket back on it, now we're going to mount the caliper to the bracket. Make sure when you do it, you don't do it where the brake hose is all twisted up. You want to make sure the brake hose is straight as can be. If you have it twisted up and you turn your wheel, it'll put extra drag on it. You could possibly end up ripping your brake hose. So usually I'll take it, kind of let it dangle, let it fall to its normal spot, how it naturally wants to go, and then you can bolt that up. Now be careful when you're tightening these that you don't over tighten these bolts and end up breaking them off. You can see what I did is I zipped them in and a real quick tap to give it its final tightening. Now I turn the wheel to the right a little bit, and the reason I did that is because I'm going to use the body to hold it for me while I torque down the axle nut, which on this one they want the axle nut tightened at 155 foot-pounds. You don't want to use an impact on them to tighten them, because when you do, it'll draw that axle into it, pull the bearing a little too tight, and then you'll end up replacing it again. Another thing that you could do there is, once you're at this point, why I went ahead and put the brakes together, is if you have somebody else, you can have them climb in, cram that brake pedal to the floor to hold the whole assembly for you from turning. Right now I don't have that luxury of somebody in there, so I'm going to do it the other way. Let's get this started on there. And actually, just so it's right, I need to go grab a ratchet. Alright. Now we're just going to run this nut all the way in. Alright, now we're going to tighten it down to the 155 foot-pounds. If you don't happen to have a torque wrench in your possession, most of the parts stores will rent one in their loaner tool section. Usually it's, your basic click type, but you would set it to 155 pounds and start tightening until you hear that little click, and then you're done. And there we go. It's time to put the wheel on. Just make sure when you're tightening your lug nuts on your wheel that you do a crisscross pattern. Helps seat the tire evenly. If the tire goes on crooked, I have seen where it'll seem like they're tight, the lug nuts don't want to tighten anymore. Then when you're driving it down the road, it'll work itself loose and the lug nuts start coming off. So make sure your wheel's against it and crisscross pattern. That's it. Now you put the wheel bearing on 2006 Impala. Now remember, once you get this done, you get it off your jack and jack stands and all that, pump up that brake if you compress that piston any whatsoever. Otherwise, when you start it up, put it in gear to move it, you go to hit your brake, it's going to go to the floor and it's not going to stop it. So make sure you pump that brake up. Well, it looks like our repair was a success. All the noises and stuff are gone now. Thank you for watching Shifting Gears, and please subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Thank you very much. Have a good day. This is getting right in the way. Lost my extension. Or we can start that over.
You want to mention something about if it does have ABS, you'll need to unplug it first? Or anything like that?
Yeah, I might help. Alright, if you have any questions about any of the projects that you see on the show or any projects that you hey, it's Paul. Alright, shall we go again?
Yes.
If you have any questions about any...
And don't forget to subscribe to us.
Enjoy the show!